let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
These people who say that we ought to withdraw from Vietnam are wholly wrong, because if we withdrew from Vietnam, the communists would control Vietnam. Pretty soon, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Malaya would go, and all of Southeast Asia would be under the control of the communists and under the domination of the Chinese.
If this little nation goes down the drain and can't maintain her independence, ask yourself what's going to happen to all the other little nations.
Some were more than advisors in the war against the communist-led insurgents, the Viet Cong.
This is 2-6. We also have some people running along the dikes. Actually, the canal is perpendicular to the one you're attacking now.
Some were more than advisors in the war against the communist-led insurgents, the Viet Cong.
This is 2-6. We're present attacking the Victor Charlie sampans on the heading from south to north, left brakes. Alpha fire team will lead the attack, followed by the rocket shield and 2-3, over. Let's bring it around here, shall we? This is 2-6. We also have some people running along the dikes. Actually, the canal is perpendicular to the one you're attacking now.
The political turmoil deepened. President Johnson offered America's full support to this new, untried leader. The political turmoil deepened.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, Mr. McNamara.
President Johnson offered America's full support to this new, untried leader. And now they faced Americans. Ho Chi Minh stepped up his support for the Viet Cong at the same time Johnson renewed the American commitment to defeat them. And now they faced Americans.
I should emphasize that the United States supported the French throughout the War of Resistance, throughout the French colonial war in Vietnam. The United States opposed the Geneva Conference, and it refused to sign the Geneva Agreements. The United States replaced the French in the South in order to continue the war through Ngo Dinh Diem and its other puppets. And then, the United States intervened directly in the war.
Ho Chi Minh stepped up his support for the Viet Cong at the same time Johnson renewed the American commitment to defeat them.
Therefore, we decided that well-equipped and larger forces had to be sent to the south.
Hanoi decided to escalate the war, and the Viet Cong stepped up their attacks in the countryside.
Therefore, we decided that well-equipped and larger forces had to be sent to the south. Chinese advisors wanted us to wage only a small-scale guerrilla war. They told us to maintain the Ho Chi Minh Trail as it had always been. They wanted us to transport supplies to the south on our backs and shoulders, as if we were ants filling up anthills. But our decision, the decision of our party, our leaders, and our Supreme High Command, was to widen the trail into a modern communications system capable of moving regular Army units.
Hanoi decided to escalate the war, and the Viet Cong stepped up their attacks in the countryside. As early as May, he had his aides draft a resolution of congressional support for the war effort.
It was discovered, however, in researching the Senate that...
As early as May, he had his aides draft a resolution of congressional support for the war effort.
One of the mistakes he thought Harry Truman made was to be involved in Korea without congressional approval. Therefore, he determined at some propitious moment that he would bring the Congress in and have them approve whatever the objectives were to be determined to be in Vietnam.
It was discovered, however, in researching the Senate that
Hanoi linked the Maddox to the South Vietnamese raids. At the time, Secretary McNamara stressed that the Maddox was simply on a routine patrol. Hanoi linked the Maddox to the South Vietnamese raids. There was a link.
Knowing in advance that from the South Vietnamese that the commando attacks were going to take place, it was very useful for the United States, for its own purpose in knowing the terrain in that area, to pick up the electronic signals and any messages that were relayed back and forth, indicating where North Vietnamese forces were, what they were doing, and what their reactions to the attacks were. Now, from the point of view of North Vietnam, I feel confident they considered U.S. and South Vietnamese forces in complete collusion to embarrass and damage North Vietnamese military facilities threatening the South.
At the time, Secretary McNamara stressed that the Maddox was simply on a routine patrol.
To North Vietnam PT boat attacks.
A few days later, Johnson gave the green light to sustained bombing in North Vietnam.
To North Vietnam PT boat attacks.
President Johnson explained what had happened, explained what he had believed was essential, the decision to conduct a reprisal and to have a clear-cut policy of further bombings as required in circumstances that seemed very likely to arise. In effect, a real change in the way we were acting.
A few days later, Johnson gave the green light to sustained bombing in North Vietnam.